Hey, what's up, guys? Can everyone hear me? How do I sound? Oh, dude, I got that can of Coke. Hey, what's up, Cat Lover? What's up, Callie? Hold on, I want to make sure everything's set up before I really get down into it. Hey, Jenna, what's up? Hey, Crystal Skull. Okay, so I thought I'd do something completely different. Something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and a lot of my fucking academic time learning about. And I'm probably gonna misspell hella shit. Notepad doesn't have spell check. I know a lot of people don't like argumentation, or a lot of people get put off by debates just because they immediately think that any kind of debate or any kind of argument has to lead to like hostility or anger. And I don't believe that at all. I've thought that debate and argumentation has just been hella fun. Like it's a really good form of entertainment and it's really a good exercise too. I think in times of quarantine like this, it's really important to just not let your mind fucking rot. So I've tried to like keep my mind as active as possible. And I thought that it would be pretty cool to go over this. I think it's something that does not really receive a lot of attention. Like the necessities of how to construct an argument. It's so critical to success in the world. And it's just a neglected subject. So I thought I would fucking put in my 2 cents for it. So the fundamentals of argumentation and debate. There are basically three different types of debates that we can consider. On one hand, we have the fact debate, the value debate, and then the policy debate. And each of them is distinct. Each of them has components, and each of them has a structure that is a little different from the other ones. So obviously, a fact debate is, well, first, what is a fact? So a fact is just a statement that's true. It's true. So when people are discussing or when they're debating a fact debate, it's not so much about what they think about the topics. It's just going to be about what is the truth of the matter. It's not about whether we like it, and it's not about whether it's good. It's just what is fundamentally true. That's what a fact debate is. And now a fact debate is pretty much the most basic kind of debate that there is. You could follow this back to like the evolution of language before we could even have values and policies, right? Before human beings even had values and policies, the fact of the matter was probably what was debated. It was only what was actually in front of you. Is there someone who's going to attack the encampment? It's like the immediate survival of human beings would have often came down and depended on fact debates that were just had to be made immediately in the moment. And then a little bit more complex and kind of stemming off of that is the value debate. And a value is more of a judgment. A value is obviously not an opinion, or it's not a fact, but a value is informed by facts. And that's why I put them in this order. The foundation of it all is going to be the facts. Everything that we're going to be debating is going to be rooted in fact in some way. And the value debate is about what is good. It's about what is preferable. It's not about what should be done necessarily, and it's not necessarily about what is. Each of those would be a policy and fact. But a value debate would just judge whether one thing is better than the other. So an example of this would be national security is more important than freedom. That would be a value debate just because there's no immediate answer. And then finally, there's the policy debate. And the policy debate is probably what we're most familiar with. It's about doing. What are we going to do? Oftentimes this comes down to, well, this is what politics is, right? It's just discussing and debating what the proper course of action is to go forward with something. So I think that these topics have not had a lot of, there's just not been that much that's been discussed about them, especially in like fucking K through 12. There's really no talk about this when it's critical, in my opinion, to navigate the world. So let's get into the first one, fact debate. So fact debate is oftentimes broken down into 3 different compartments. You would have the claim, the warrant, and the, well, you can call it either analysis or conclusion, but I'll call it the analysis. So first, let's get into a fact debate. I'll look to the chat. I didn't plan this. I don't have a book or anything. This is just completely fucking impromptu. How about someone in the chat suggest something that could be subject to a fact debate? So this could be something like cats are better than dogs, or fucking Nevada is, or I'm sorry, not cats. So a fact debate like the earth is flat, right? Something that could just be a scientific fact. But I'll wait till someone in the comments says something that could be considered to be a fact debate. So it could be anything. Global warming, that's a fact debate. Whether global warming is happening or is not happening, that's a debate that unfolds in scientific communities. And it's not about what is right, and it's not about what we should be doing. It's simply about the matter at hand. So fact debates are essential. You know what? I'll just start. So the fact debate I'll use for the example is the earth is flat. Let's just fucking erase all this. So let's say you had that opinion that the earth is flat. You could structure an argument in the following. Claim. So the claim would just be a succinct way to explain what your argument is going to be. For a fact debate, an argument is going to consist of a conclusion and then specific pieces of evidence that support that conclusion. And the claim would just be kind of an overarching statement that can describe whatever your argument is. So an example of an argument for why the earth is flat, you'd say, science lies. I mean, that's kind of a nonsensical answer. I'll be more specific than that. I'll say NASA is an Illuminati ploy. And this is something that's actually, I probably spelled Illuminati wrong, whatever. This is something that's actually been discussed and that's been thought like in some circles of people who actually believe in the flat earth. And then the warrants for that. So here would be the point that this would be the focal point of the argument that you would be able to attack in order to defeat the argument. So if someone made the claim, if someone was trying to tell you that the earth is flat, they could say, okay, the earth is flat. My first argument for this is that NASA is infiltrated by the fucking Illuminati, which is obviously not true, but, and then they could say, and I know that because, so that would be the warrant. And they say, I know that because my sister is working for them and told me. Now that's a really poor warrant. That's not a good reason to believe something, right? So if a person said that NASA was funded by the Illuminati and they knew that because their sister was working for NASA, then you could immediately discredit them and be like, dude, you're full of shit. But for the purpose of this argument, so if NASA is an Illuminati ploy and a person knows that because their sister is working for them and told them, we can conclude that NASA is spreading lies. We can make a lot more extrapolations based off of the warrant. So we could extrapolate to NASA spreading lies about the atmosphere, NASA spreading lies about global warming. There's a multitude of things that we could So I just saw Jenna in the comments. So Jenna just said, I'm not even looking at the comments that much. Jenna just said chemtrails. Exactly. That's a much better one. That's a much better one. Thank you, Jenna. So chemtrails are real. And that could be, that is an opinion that many people have. I mean, it's an opinion, but it's something that people believe. And a person could say that and say, chemtrails are real. And that could be your claim, right? So, chemtrails are real. The warrant for that, so, and I don't even have to tell you, right? So if someone said that chemtrails were real, I think the first thing that we could do to check that would just be to fucking look up at the sky. So a person could say, aha, Fast Eddie, chemtrails are real. And then I, Fast Eddie, would say, but how do you know that? Why do you believe that? And the person could say, I looked up at the sky and saw them. And then from that, I could say, I believe what I see more than science. That could be the conclusion that someone makes, right? So someone could say, I see something that looks up to be a chemtrail. They could say, I see something in the sky that looks, in my estimation, to be consistent with what I believe a chemtrail to be. And therefore, the fact that I see them means that they're real. And the fact that they're not acknowledged by NASA could therefore mean that NASA's full of shit. That's just an example of one. So let's move on to a value debate. A value debate is much more interesting in my estimation. They're more about what is good and what is preferable. It's not about what is the matter at hand. So a value debate, things like religion, things like even the fucking flavor of ice cream. If two people were trying to decide whether chocolate was preferable to vanilla, that would be more of a value debate. And of course, there's a little bit of overlap between a fact debate and a value debate. You could say that, well, a person could say chocolate is simply better and that's a fact. Of course, that's not a fact. And a person could argue that chocolate is superior to vanilla, and they could argue as if it were a fact, but that wouldn't make it a fact. At the root of that debate would just be two contrasting points of view. So a fact debate is structured very similar to a value debate is structured very similar to a fact debate. So far that it has a claim, a warrant, and analysis. And so for this one, one of the most common ones, someone said I spelled trails. Yeah, the spelling is going to be fucked in this video. I'm not really concerned with the spelling. But one of the examples for this would, be that dogs are preferable to cats. So that would be a value debate. So let's see, dogs, or let's just say better than cats, just for the sake of argument. The claim could be, your first argument, right, could be that, you could just call it companionship. So that's my first argument, companionship. The claim to that dogs make better companions for people. I'll just save the... Okay, so your claim is that dogs make better companions for people. The warrant be dogs are lovey. Dogs always want to be petted, most dogs, and cats are not like that. A lot of cats like to be fucking left alone. Dogs, on the other hand, are like, they just want to be all up in your shit, and they're just happy to see you, and kind of different than cats. So you could say dogs are lovey and express more physical intimacy. I mean, that sounds fucked up, but I mean, dogs like being pet. Not all cats like being pet the way that a dog might like to be pet. So the fact that a dog actively wants to be playful and the dog actively wants to see you, that might make them a better companion. And then we go to the analysis. So then we could say, even in a situation like this specifically, right? Let's talk about the quarantine specifically. So if you were arguing that dogs are better than cats and you were making this companionship argument, I think it would be especially relevant to point out that times quarantine, dogs provide much needed socialization. And that could be kind of the analysis. So the analysis is separate from the warrant. The analysis is basically just tying in the claim and the warrant. So it's taking a step back from each of those two pieces, and it's more so just synthesizing them together. So that would be the analysis. And in times of quarantine, dogs provide much needed socialization. So a person could make an argument, a value. The person could make an argument within a value debate, and they could make the argument that dogs are preferable to cats. I see Archibald III, Joe Wonderler liked intimacy from dogs. Dude, exactly. That is the fucking truest thing I've seen all morning. Okay. And now the most interesting one, the policy debate. These are definitely the types of debate that most people are familiar with. I don't even want to point to like the presidential debates, just because the presidential debates oftentimes are not policy debates. If you actually listen, they oftentimes come down to just values. Like there's very little substance that's being said. It's really impossible to discuss the nuance of fucking foreign policy in like a 30-second soundbite, and that's oftentimes what the presidential debates devolve into. But a policy debate is probably the most complex, at least technically complex, form of argumentation out of the three. And these are the three types of arguments. Pretty much any claim or any type of thing that you wanted to debate, it would fall into one of these three categories. Either a fact debate, which you're discussing what is true, a value debate, where you're discussing what is preferable or what is better, and then a policy debate, where you're discussing what should specifically be done. So a policy debate. Let's talk about the stimulus, right? We have all of us, or most of us, have a $1,200 stimulus check that's coming. That was a policy that was debated. It was a policy that was discussed in our legislatures, and it rolled out. And in the middle of that, we can imagine that some of the argumentation must have went like this. Let's see, how do I want to phrase it? Each American will receive $1,200. So that would be the policy that would be being debated. And in any kind of debate, there would be at least two individuals, two different sides who are arguing this. So on one side, you'd have people who are arguing that yes, each American should receive $1,200 as a form of like temporary stimulus. And then on the other side, you'd have people saying no, for whatever reason, and there are a multitude of reasons why a person could object. They could think that any stimulus money is going to be bad for the economy, or they could think that maybe $1,200 is too little. They could say, why not $2,400, right? So a person could reject this specific premise for a multitude of reasons. But let's get down to what it would look like if a person was actually arguing that each American should receive $1,200. For this one, it's a little more different. Let's set this bitch up. So the way that we'd start a policy debate is with harms. And what are harms? Harms are going to be the bad things that are present in the status quo. So for the purposes of our argument that each American should receive $1,200, the harms would be that people can't pay their fucking rent. Say, Corona is fucking everywhere, bruh. Can't work. So a lot of people who are working in service industry jobs, a lot of people who are working in all kinds of industries are now out of work. And this is problematic for the economy. We've seen the fucking Dow Jones take a nosedive. The price of Bitcoin, even other cryptos, kind of went down too. There have been a multitude of effects that have been pretty fucked up, pretty bad effects that have happened. Not even necessarily related directly to the virus, but economic and political strife as well. So the first thing that you're going to talk about if you were proposing this idea, you would say, dude, things are really bad. So you would just enumerate how bad things are. So if you were being specific, you would say, I don't have the statistics in front of me. You could say, let's make it up. 10% of Americans are unemployed. Now, this is not true. I don't know if it's true, actually. I don't think it's true. But this is just an example of what you could say. So you could say, hey, things are really bad right now. We have to do something. The whole point of a policy debate is a person is saying, hey, we have to do something. So the very first part of that is to say, things are really bad, and here's why we have to do something. The harms are just going to outline why you need to take some kind of activity. Then after that, you can go on to the links. The links are going to be the overarching connection between your harms, between what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to accomplish. So you could say that stimulus packages relieve poverty. And of course, this would be a contested point, whether, in the short term, you could make this argument very quickly, but in the long term, it's a much more difficult argument to make, right? Like how that would sustain itself. But that's an example of what an argument could be if a person was inclined to make it. So the link would just be, let me write that. The link, you would just say, in a broad sense, the money that people are going to get is going to relieve their poverty and stimulate the economy. It's just an overarching description of what your plan is going to do. So it's going to relieve poverty. Your internal links are going to be the specifics of how that's accomplished. So instead of just being broad and saying, okay, the stimulus package that we're going to receive is going to relieve people's poverty, you're just going to say internal links. You're gonna basically describe the future. So you're going to pretend, and people who are in a debate, this is the most effective way to do it, using vivid language and whatnot. You would say, listen, things are really bad right now. We have to send out this stimulus because all these, and this is the harms, because all these people are unemployed, because people are losing their homes, because businesses are closing down. There's a multitude of things we could just enumerate, things that are bad in the status quo. And then we say, aha, but the link, and the link is basically how we get to our outcome. You say, aha, but the stimulus package that I'm proposing is going to relieve that poverty. It's going to fix the problems. And then your internal links is, okay, specifically, how is that going to happen? So for the first way, you would say, well, people are going to receive their checks. And that would be the first step. But that's not the only step. After that, and in an argument, I mean, of course, if you're arguing in person, you wouldn't write things down like this. I'm doing this just for the sake of this stream. But in your head, it might be a little easier to kind of just think about the different arguments and the different links inside of an argument. So you would have, your first internal link. People are going to receive their checks. And then after that, people are going to spend their checks. And then you could argue that because people need their checks, because people are unemployed, they're more likely to spend their checks rather than just sitting on them. It's not like the government is mailing out these checks in the middle of a fucking prosperity. The government is issuing these checks in the middle of some real serious economic choppy waters. So it's much more likely that because we're in a time of economic choppy waters, that people are actually going to spend their checks. And then finally, and most importantly, the impacts. The impacts are pretty much what all policy debates boil down to in the end. The impacts are just where you're going to talk about specifically what the future is going to look like. The harms are just what is bad. What are you trying to solve for? The link is, how is your plan going to work? How is whatever you're proposing in a broad sense going to work? The internal links is, okay, specifically, how is your plan going to work? What is going to happen? It's like use language to illustrate how that's going to take place, what it's going to look like. And then finally, the impacts. So the impacts. This is going to be where you illustrate the future. Say, well, decrease in poverty. Or no, say life, right? So the impact of this, life. If you're in a debate, it's best to just go, or even if you're arguing with someone, you know, if I was in a debate, I oftentimes try and win. I think it's just because I'm competitive. So in this sense, I'll construct an argument. If I was actually trying to win, I would say life. I would say the impact of my plan. So for instance, if I was proposing this $1,200 stimulus plan, I'd say the impact of this is life. I am literally saving people's lives. And this, conversely, you could say the impact of your plan. If you were arguing against, you could say, oh, the impact is actually death, right? So if you were on the opposing side, your argument would just be basically reversed. The opposing side, well, I'll get into that later. But the impacts for this, yeah, would be life or prosperity. To be measured in GDP or whatever. But there are a multitude of things that we could define as impacts. We could define as things that would happen as a result of our plan. Or let's say this. Yeah. People paying their rent. That's the impact of the plan. After we have enumerated the impacts, that's not the end of how we would analyze this kind of argument, right? So we have this argument that Americans, for whatever see, I'm going to write this out. Federal, why is that capital? Federal government. So this would be what you're advocating for in your policy debate. You would say each American will receive, or should or will, depending on the actual debate. Each American will receive a $1,200 stimulus package from the federal government. And then, of course, your harms. Why does that need to happen, right? Oh, because, people are unemployed and shit's bad. No one can pay their rent, their fucking mortgage, blah, blah, blah. The link is, well, my plan, which is the stimulus package, is going to relieve poverty. It's going to put money in people's pockets. It's just a broad, overarching way that you could conceptualize how your plan is going to work. And then the internal links, of course, much more specific. So people are going to receive their checks, and then people are going to spend their checks on rent. And then the impacts, people pay their rent. After we have the impacts, we could go into how do we evaluate impacts, right? So a debate would be basically this. Let's see if I could bring it a little bit fucking smaller because it's way too big. Exactly. So a argument would basically have these four, in some rudimentary sense, they'd have these four components. But a debate is going to be two different sides, each having arguments of their own. So how do you evaluate which argument is preferable? Let's say that you're arguing that each American should receive this stimulus package, and then someone else argues actually any stimulus package is going to be bad because it's, and you would start naming off the reasons, but well, let's do that, right? Let's think about that. So why would this specific idea be bad? Let's just write the counter argument. So we could call this, let's call this argument state dependency bad. So if you're arguing against the idea that I just said, okay, people are in desperate financial times and they need some kind of money, something to help, and something to pay their rent. That was basically the crux of that last argument. However, to argue against that, you could make a different argument saying, okay, that is not the way that we should go about this. So to do that, you could say, in contrast, you think you're doing a positive thing by giving people money, but state dependency is bad. The harms for that, you would say, well, the government is already, so let's get into this. The government doesn't have the money. That could be one harm. Let's structure that in a more cogent sense. The deficit will not permit. You'd say that we simply don't have the money, that there's other obligations, financial obligations that must be met that are more important, like ventilators or something. I mean, you could directly correlate them or directly anchor them in the corona, in the quarantine. But you would just say, although things are, you could acknowledge that, yeah, it is kind of bad that people are struggling with their rent. But you could say, however, there are much more serious dangers and much more serious harms that will happen if you pass your plan. So this is why policy debates are oftentimes so interesting, because of the complexity and because of the relevance for all of us living in a democracy. Whether you vote or not, this is how people come to form policies. They debate them, at least in a legislative sense. I think that most people don't, and that's okay. But people who are debating this, like as a lawmaker or as a lawyer or whatever, this is the structure that they would be using. So your argument could be that, yeah, state dependency is bad. The harms for that, well, we don't have the money to give to people. The deficit will not permit this. The link could be, let's see. The link could be that when you give people money, it decentivizes work. And this is a very common rebuttal. It's a common kind of answer to the call for universal basic income. And that's basically what this $1,200 stimulus is. It's like one little slice of what a universal basic income is. It's just money given to you from the government. So the link for this argument could be that when you give people money, it decentivizes them to work. And then the internal link is, well, what would that actually look like? How does that plan come into effect? You would say the internal links. People are going to get their shit. And will not be looking for work. And of course, this is this is kind of a weak argument, but I'm just outlining it so we have something. So your internal link could be that people are going to get their money, and that this in turn specifically is going to decentivize them from looking for work. So whereas your link was just a broad overarching way, you could say for work in specific sectors, like let's be specific, is they will not be looking for public work. So let's say things like police officers or things like fire fucking whatever, any kind of job that is still functioning right now, like one of the indispensable forms of employment. You could make the argument that even giving a stimulus package to everyone is going to decrease the amount of people that we have still able to work those jobs. Of course, this is not a great argument, but this is just an example. And then you get into the impacts. What happens? Well, you'd say the government, the USA will run out of money. That's one impact. So you could say we can't give people all this money, and of course this isn't the case. The US has far more fucking money than would bankrupt them from giving $1,200 to each person. But you could make the argument that if we commit this plan, if we follow through with this plan, it's going to lead to the fucking collapse of the United States. And oftentimes when you're arguing in politics, it's better to just fucking go for the head. I mean, why even try and why try and squeak out some meager kind of victory? If you can tie something to a large issue, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the more effective strategy in a debate. So whenever you're having a political debate, the two things that you want to get to, nuclear, and I'm not kidding, this is one of the best. Nuclear extinction, dehumanization. So for your impacts, you could say, well, if we give people this stimulus, it's going to make them not work, and if it makes them not work, then they're not going to then the economy is going to get shitty, and if the economy gets shitty, then it's going to be the collapse of the United States, and if the United States collapses, then China's going to nuke us. Literally, that is how a person could link out, and you use links as a successive kind of chain, right? So you would just say this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, leads to nuclear extinction or dehumanization. And you can have these impacts. You could make a case and say, if we give people this $1,200 or this $1,200, it's going to lead to the extinction of the human race. I mean, you could make that argument, and you could say, as I said, well, you do this, it leads to this, it leads to this. USA collapses, and then someone nukes us, right? And then you could respond and say, okay, what you're saying might be true. It's possible, but it's not plausible. So once you have your impacts, and the impacts are the things that happen as a result of the policy, then you get into the impact calculus. So the impact calculus is just the way that we compare impacts. So it's the way that both sides of an argument in a policy debate are going to say that they're right, and that you have to listen to them, and that they have all the facts, and that they're going to tell you what's up. So whenever you hear two different sides of a debate, you could think, well, what do I think? Which impact matters more? How do we evaluate? How do we weigh these out? What kind of scale can we use to see which side, oh shit, I hit that. What kind of scale can we use to see which side is making a more heavy and a more just better argument? Well, we use time frame, magnitude, and probability. So for the nuclear extinction argument, say someone is talking about nuclear extinction. We use an impact calculus to weigh that out. So we think the time frame. Is it likely that is it likely? When would this happen? So that's the first way. Someone says, if we give people this money, it's going to lead to a nuclear extinction. It's going to lead to, let's just say this one too. Let's just say China takes over. That's more, I think, relevant to this. China takes over USA. Conquest, right? We can just put this in a 20th century definition of military conquest. A person could make that argument. And you say, okay, when would this happen? So it's so unlikely that China would take over the USA as a result of this kind of stimulus bill, right? This one specific policy. But if a person made the argument, you could say, okay, let's talk about that. You're making this claim about the future. You're telling me what's going to happen. So when, right? The time frame is the first thing. Someone says this. Well, if we do this, it's going to lead to China taking over. You say, okay, when will that happen, dude? Is it going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to happen in a decade? Is it going to happen in 100 years? There's pretty much there. Even in a best case scenario, you could say that China would take over the U.S. as a result of this in a few days, right? It's not even possible in the 21st century to have like kind of an immediate takeover of a country. So there would immediately be months. Best case scenario, you're probably looking at months before there would be a a rebellion-free takeover of the U.S., which would probably never happen. But in the most immediate sense, it would be a while. It's not going to be overnight. However, you say, okay, so it's if it's going to happen, it's going to take a while. That would be the time frame of the U.S. or of China taking over the U.S. And then you say, okay, well, the magnitude. So magnitude is just how serious is it? Well, it's pretty fucking serious. So the magnitude is a 10 out of 10. I mean, that would be a huge deal if China, if any nation took over another fucking nation today, especially the United States. It would be something that would be written in history books till the fucking end of humanity. It would be a very big deal in contemporary global politics. So the magnitude of this would be very serious. So even though it wouldn't happen in a while, it would take a little bit of time for it to happen. Magnitude is very heavy. This is a serious topic. But, and this one is very important as well, the probability. So a person says, yeah, China's going to take over the US if you pass this fucking bill. You say, okay, how likely is that? How likely is it that a first world country is going to issue this little stimulus and then have another country take them over? It's highly unlikely. It's not likely to happen at all. So the probability, let's say extremely unlikely. Just because the two things, there's so much that would also have to happen before the United States was overthrown because of this specific policy. And then this one is less popular, but I really think this one is important too. It's reversibility. And this just asks, can what you're doing be reversed? So can you reverse the decision that you're going to make? Is there any going back from it? So if China takes over the US, that is reversible. So nations, the plots of land that governments have fought over, they've remained the same, but the fucking flags, they've changed, and they're probably going to change, right? No empire has lasted forever, obviously, and whoever is the dominant military or political force within any given area is subject to fucking change, and that's just a fact of life. So is this reversible? Yes. However, let's say that a person said, okay, we should nuke certain country, right? So we're gonna nuke blah 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 country. So then that is not reversible. If you nuke a country, if you nuke, or if you use some kind of finite resource, if you were to use up all the diamonds on Earth for whatever fucking mad scientist plan you had, that's not reversible. I mean, you could make the argument that it is, but it's a very difficult argument to make that it would be reversible. Like, you're using up all of something. You can't give that back. Another good one is death, right? If you kill someone, you can't give their life back. It's irreversible. So the impact, because that's what we're talking about, the impact of taking a life, one of the reasons it's so bad, one of the reasons that murder is such a serious crime is because there's no reversibility. For theft, for burglary, and other violent crimes, you could very easily come back from them. So I'm going to look at the chat because I have not even looked at the chat for a while. Hey Eddie, what is popping? Hey, what's up, dude? I'm worried more about Lauren becoming president than China taking over. Exactly. China is absolutely not going to take over. That was just a random example. Machiavellianism, always a good approach. That's funny, Sheila. I spent a lot of time with Machiavelli, The Prince specifically. I think The Prince is an excellent work as well. The Prince is fucking great. So what do you guys think about this? I didn't have any kind of I don't have any notes or any kind of book that I'm going from. I'm literally just kind of going, basically just going. So if anyone has anything to contribute, I would absolutely love to answer any questions or to further explain anything that I've been vague about or anything. So let's see. And another thing, so the impact calculus, you don't have to necessarily be in a debate to use an impact calculus. This is something that we could use in our daily lives. And I think if anything is taken away from this, I think impact calculus is one of the most important things. So impact calculus. Should I ride in a car? So if you're wondering, let's say, should I drive my car? Or should you take a bus? Let's say that a person is considering whether they're going to drive their car or whether they're going to take a bus. So you would think time frame. Obviously, the time frame is you're going to get to your destination faster if you use a car. And oftentimes, accomplishing whatever you're trying to do faster is preferable. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. So oftentimes, a more immediate time frame is a more compelling reason. So should you use your car or should you take the bus? Well, if you were debating those two things, what am I going to do? The time frame. I wonder if I can. Yeah, let's do this. I'll structure it out so we can have two opposing. Hey, what do you guys think about a debate? You know, I was talking with another YouTuber who you guys probably all know about about doing some kind of debate, like kind of like a TCAP related debate. One of the ideas he threw out was whether TCAP is entrapment or not. And I think that's a good one. Although I don't want to defend the predators, I think it would be kind of shitty to have to defend and basically say why it's not entrapment. But also, so yeah, let me know if you guys actually think debates are kind of interesting and you wanted to hear like a TCAP related debate. Definitely just like post it in a comment or something, because I would love to get feedback from the audience on this one. So let's say drive my car or bus. So you were thinking about these things, car or bus, and you're trying to evaluate which one am I going to take? Well, the time frame is obviously going to be the car. You're going to win this aspect. And the impact calculus, it's these four things, and you could see where each specific impact lands within them. So this idea of should I take a car or should I take the bus? Time frame clearly is going to be the car. It's going to be quick if you take the car. And if you take the bus, the time frame is going to be a long time. The magnitude, well, if you take a car, you could die. You know, and if you're in a small car or if you're in a motorcycle or something, you could die. That's a very serious risk that could happen. If you're in a bus, although it's slower, you're probably less likely, you could still die, but you're less likely to die in an automobile collision in a bus, probably. So you could say, well, you know, it's better. Well, I think I kind of fucked that up. Yeah, see, I'm just kind of making this up off the top of my head. The magnitude for both of them would be pretty similar. This would be better for walking. Let's do that. That's better. Yeah, so time frame definitely going to be car, and then the time frame for walking is going to be a long ass fucking time. The magnitude for each of them could be death, and you could say, well, the magnitude is worst case scenario, you die if you take your car, and then worst case scenario, you die if you're walking. However, and here's where the debate would probably get to be interesting, is the probability. So it's which is going to be more likely. If you were actually debating, and this could be a personal debate, whether you're going to walk to the store or whether you're going to drive to the store, it would probably be a debate over time frame and probability. You would literally just say, okay, I can get there really quickly if I take my car, but what is the probability of something bad happening on the way there? So what is the probability of something bad happening if I take my car to the store? And then you could evaluate that against what is the probability of something bad happening if I walk to the store? And that would be where the majority of the actual debate unfolds. The reversibility would probably be fairly similar for both of them. Each of them is a reversible action. But the impact calculus is indispensable. It's something that all of us use it on some level. whenever we make a decision, whenever we decide to do anything, we make these kinds of impact calculus decisions just immediately. Okay. Hey, boo. Aw, Conscious fell asleep to my Dan Allen. Thank you. You know, a lot of people got pissed at me for the farts, but that was the only fucking one I could find. And, you know, looking back, I'm glad that the one that I did had all the fucking farts inside of it. Yeah, that could be very controversial. Sam Pendleton hosted a TCAP debate once. Basically, they were debating whether it was right to make eye contact with the predators. That is good. That is an interesting debate. I would love to hear. See, that's awesome. That's the kind of thing that I kind of wanted to open this up to the audience for, to see if there are any other kinds of ideas that we could get, or any kinds of other topics that could even be thrown out. Father, son, I'm a very respected member of the community. Am I in class? Yes, Joey. We're always in class, dude. Life is fucking class. I love debates. I'm a sucker for religious debates and Christian apologetics, being a former believer, but I never thought about a TCAP debate. Could be interesting. Patrick, man, I spent so much time listening to fucking religious debates. I think one of the most, if there was probably a topic of debate that I'm extremely familiar with, it would be religious debates. I was obsessed with Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, Daniel Dennett, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, what they're referred to oftentimes. Hitchens, Dawkins, Dennett, and is it Harris? Sam Harris? I think it's Sam Harris. Either way, though, yeah, the religious debate is probably one of the, you know what, let's do that. So is God real? This is a really interesting question. So a religious debate, is God real? That would be a fact debate. So is God real? This would be a debate of fact, to where we're just saying, yes, there is a creator, or no, there is not a creator. And the evidence of this would probably be scientific. Anecdotal evidence is not really going to be compelling. You could say, yeah, science says, and then you would have a reason to say blah, blah, blah. And that would be the majority of this debate. It would not be, well, I had this divine revelation, because that's not compelling argument. So, or I guess it's not a compelling argument for me. Of course, I'm a fucking atheist, and one of the hallmarks of being religious is like to have faith, and it's required to not know in order to have faith. Like, you can't have faith if you're certain of something. So I understand that, but yeah, the is God real debate, here's what it would look like. Is God real? You would say, yeah, how did shit get here? This could be called the prime mover argument. Let's do this. Something is in motion. Oh, what's this? An object in motion was put in motion by something else. This is from Thomas Aquinas originally, and it's one of the Kinkai, which was a list of different reasons why God is real. But this one is basically an object in motion, or if something is moving, then it was acted upon by something else. So you trace that back. The first thing that ever must have happened had to have been God. That would be one of the arguments for this. You say, well, things are moving all around us today. What was the beginning of that? It's very similar to the how is there something rather than nothing. That's similar. A man of God. Yeah, exactly. And then a contrast to this, so you could say, yeah, the prime mover argument. Well, dude, if anything is moving, then it had to have been acted upon by something else. You could say, no, because particle physics, bruh. Particle physics and cosmology suggest no God needed. So a person to refute this could say, and of course this is a fact debate, a person refuting this would say, well, we don't necessarily have to understand how it happened, but it could have happened without a God. So I know it seems counterintuitive, the argument of, well, how do you get something rather than nothing? It seems to be a compelling argument just based off of kind of human intuition. And that's because that's how our reality is. That's things human beings, we have this limited capacity, right? We can't really understand infinity. So in a kind, we are intrinsically linked to a causal. We move through life in regard to causality. We're not immortal. We all have temporal finite limitations. So it's difficult for us to ponder questions like what existed before the Big Bang, right? That very question, it seems to kind of defy common sense, and it does defy common sense because nothing existed before the Big Bang, right? But then it's a difficult thing to wrap your mind around. That's my point. But you could say, even though we don't understand it, even though I, a layman, a non-physicist, don't understand the complexities of this, there are scientists who have done this, and then we could enumerate and go, well, CERN has said this, and that's, of course, the particle accelerator that this particle accelerator has produced a compelling amount of evidence for a godless universe. What CERN has done, the particle accelerator, is smashed protons together to try and create a environment that was similar to moments after the Big Bang. And in doing that, they've been able to predict the behavior of certain particles. So a person will have a theory and say, okay, in this theory, I predict that this particle will do this when this happens. So then they smash them together and they see. So that would be a kind of scientific refutation of this, because Aquinas didn't have a particle accelerator. Aquinas just looked at the world and said, well, there's a bunch of shit that's here, and there's a bunch of shit that's active. So someone had to have done it, right? That makes sense for us as people. If we have a dog and, we put that dog in a room and that dog is born in the room, that dog may think that the room is all there is. That dog might think that you're God if the dog has never left the room. Similarly, even though there's much more outside of that dog's comprehension that the dog just doesn't know. And that would be akin to this argument, because Aquinas, of course, had limited faculties. This was a few hundred years ago, I believe. And in that time, in his limited capacities, he made a good argument at the time. But we could refute that with contemporary science and say, actually, according to physics, according to chemistry, according to other disciplines, and then we could refute that. And that would be a fact debate. So is God real? That would be about facts. Is God real? Now, let's get into a value debate. Is God good? This is another good one. So, let's start with the negative. Let's do this. Value. God is evil. Let's say that, because this is an actual position that's been made. You could say, you know what? I acknowledge that there's God. So this is a value debate. So let's say that there are two people and they're not discussing what is. They're not discussing whether something is actually true or not. They're talking about the judgment. They're talking about their assessment of the thing, not whether the thing exists. They're just talking about their assessment and their judgment of the thing. So a person could say, you know what? Yeah, I'll grant you that God is real, but he's fucking evil. And then to say that, they could say, God allows suffering. And this is a compelling argument. You could make you don't even have to really fucking look outside your own life. I'm sure all of us have had some amount of suffering that really is unnecessary, right? You could think about poverty and think about just the horrible things that have happened. I mean, To Catch a Predator, right? So To Catch a Predator, the show that all of us fucking laugh at, it's really fucked up. It's fucked up that these people are doing this. It's an evil thing that they're doing. So why does God allow for this to happen? That's a compelling argument. Why does God create a universe and then allow everyone to suffer? Why even do it? Why would God bring people into the world just to live for a few years in abject suffering and abject misery? There's no point. It seems preferable to not even exist in that paradigm. Furthermore, you can make the argument God is evil because he allows suffering, and if you don't believe, he sends you to hell. That's another argument that you could give against Christianity. You could say, well, not only does he allow suffering, he fucking condemns us for not being born in the right country or not being born in the right time. There are a multitude of arguments you could make as to why God is evil. However, there are also a multitude of arguments you could make as to why God is good. So a refutation to this: God allows suffering, poverty, rape, war, all this bad shit that happens that God allows as the supreme creator of the universe. There's a quote too, I forget who said it. It's like a Greek, it's some Greek, and he's like, is God able to do this? Okay. Is God able to do this? Okay. Basically, the point is, God is either all powerful or apathetic, and it's either or, because God is either capable of doing all this shit and he doesn't give a fuck, or he gives a fuck and can't do anything to fix it, so therefore he's not even God. So that's kind of like a complex argument to try and disprove God. However, you could say, well, God is not evil, you could say. And this is one of my favorite arguments. I'm an atheist, but when I heard this argument, I remember really just being kind of baffled by the fucking brilliance of it. So, God, let's say this: humans must have free will. And if humans have free will, they will be evil. Let's say some will be evil. Let's fix this. Okay. This argument, which this would be a refutation of whether God is evil. We'd say human beings must have free will to love, and if human beings have free will, some will be evil. This argument is more about the importance of free will. So if someone said that God is evil because God allows all this suffering and all this poverty and all this other bullshit, you could say, because God, in order to have love, had to bestow freedom to human beings. If I had a gun and I pointed the gun at your head and I told you to love me, you would not be able to do it. You wouldn't be able, I couldn't force you. No one can force you to love someone or something. Love must be a choice. By definition, you cannot force someone to love. You could force obedience and you could force allegiance and you could make someone scared of you, but you can't force someone to love you. So if God, in order for human beings to love God, human beings must have a choice to not love God. Human beings must have a choice. They must have free will. And if human beings have a choice, and if human beings have free will, some of them are going to be fucking assholes. That would be the way to kind of refute the idea that because God allows suffering, God is evil. And this argument is often referred to as the theodicy. I'm going to fuck up the spelling on that. I think there are a few theodicies too, but it's one of the best arguments for this. So what do you say? I love what Conscious is saying, dude. You're awesome. Well, whether it adds up or not, God is my savior, and that is the truth. Exactly. It's really disgusting how often people, especially on fucking TCAP, revert back to this Christianity bullshit in order to buy them sympathy. And of course, I have a lot of respect for Christians who are legit, upstanding people who really practice what they preach. But if you're gonna bullshit, if you're gonna fucking wear Jesus on your sleeve and then be a scumbag, then I have no respect for you. You're kind of a piece of shit in my estimation. And this is one of the best. And let's go to another. So, fact versus value. One of the things that gets conflated most often to no fucking end is evolution, right? So we think of evolution. So a person will say, you believe in evolution? Oh my God, evolution is so ugly. Evolution has all these things. Evolution, survival, of the fittest. That's what we think of when we think of evolution. We think of natural selection. So in a lot of these religious debates, people who don't believe in evolution, the debate is about fact, right? So it'll be a fact debate on whether evolution is true or on whether God is real. So that would be the debate. The debate is whether something is true or not. What often happens from the Christian apologetics is that they'll say, "Ugh, evolution is so ugly though. Evolution supports this paradigm in which we fuck each other over and we are trying to screw people over for our own benefit." People make assumptions about values based off of the fact, when really we're not talking about the value, we're talking about the fact. So oftentimes in a fact debate regarding God, so people are debating simply whether God is real or whether God is not real. As soon as evolution gets thrown out, you'll have a Christian apologist say, evolution is so fucked up though, because I have a cousin, and the cousin is disabled, and they have a feeding tube, and in a Darwinian paradigm, they'd be fucked over. So a person would say that would be a misstep, right? Because the debate isn't about fact, or that debate isn't about fact, it's about value. If a person makes the claim that evolution is bad, therefore not true, so ever bad, not true. That's bullshit. It's improper to say that just because something is bad, that it fundamentally must not be true. That's logically inconsistent. Let's see, what does this say? You're a Bible, so you're a religious man. Didn't your faith in God suggest that you shouldn't come over to hang out with a 13-year-old girl? This is awesome. I've been like kind of serious going about this debate stuff, and there's all this awesomeness in the chat. God, I love it. So yeah, this is one of the biggest pet peeves I think that I've had in listening to these types of debates. I think thinking about religious debates and how they're framed, you really see the overlap between fact, value, specifically fact and value. Because oftentimes when someone is saying, here's what I believe, another person will say, okay, what you believe reflects X, Y, and Z values, when that is not always the case. It is possible to acknowledge that evolution is real, Darwinian natural selection is a fact, but that it necessarily shouldn't inform the way that we live our life. We can acknowledge that, yeah, it's true, but that doesn't mean that we need to eradicate people who are disabled or whatever. We don't need to comply with this vicious Darwinian ideal in order to acknowledge the reality of natural selection by evolution. The two things are not directly linked. We can believe one without necessarily believing the other. And religious debates are by far, I think, one of the most personal debates that there are. I think one of the reasons I got into religious debates so heavily too is just because it was something where the stakes are high. I knew that debating politics, I've followed politics very closely. I'm not really political. I'm pretty much a centrist, but I think it's really interesting to just think about. I like thinking about politics, and I like thinking about the different ways that debates could unfold in a political sense. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. Because and there's so much overlap between these two things, between the fact and the value. It's kind of crazy. Let's see how long. And what else is there? Some of the atheist books that I really got into, Dawkins. Anything by Richard Dawkins, I think, would be probably a really good place to start if you were someone who is questioning religion and someone who is opening themselves up to a secular perspective. I think that Dawkins is one of the best places that you could start. But yeah, so in terms of of what counts as acceptable evidence. So if someone believes in God and they say God exists because I saw them. So here's another really interesting point. So this brings up something else separately. So God is real. And the person could say that God is real because they talk to God, right? So I could say that there's a tree outside of my window and I know that the tree is real because I see the tree. Say I see it, I could see it right now, it's real. A person could say, well, God is real. How do you know? Well, I talked to him. It's like, although technically I can't prove that they didn't. I can't prove that a person didn't talk to God. And that's what makes it, in my estimation, unacceptable as evidence. That would be anecdotal evidence. It would kind of just be, I guess, anecdotal, kind of like a story, like just relevant and unique to you. It's not something that's objective or something that's empirical. It's something that's an opinion. And of course, in a debate of almost kind of any sense, facts over opinions, bruh. Because a fact can be measured. Oftentimes, a fact can be reproduced. A fact can be evaluated. Opinion more just is. It's more something that you can't really. I mean, you can talk about it, but you can't really show people in the same way that you could show a fact. But nonetheless, so a person could say that they talk to God, and they could call that a basic fact. And this is something that's employed in philosophy. I think Platinga did this. He's the guy who came up with this. So you would say that, well, God exists, and I know God exists because I talked to him. And Alvin Platinga could say that is a basic fact. That fact is as basic as if I were to sit down in this chair and then tell you that, yes, I'm sitting in this chair, and I know that because it's a basic fact. Let's see. Anis Moeski, from TCAP analysis to debate skills, I guess your channel has everything. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't, I haven't really actually done a lot. I've pretty much only done like, this debate, my grant's motto, and then everything else has just been TCAP. But I thought at this point it would be cool to like just talk about something else for a fucking change. I saw my first one as a Christian, fully expecting the atheist to get smited by the gospel. I couldn't have been more wrong. I wanted Christianity to be true, but it just fails on nearly every front. Yeah, I agree. I do not think that. I think that the arguments for religion sometimes could be compelling, but given the evidence, let's write it out, right? So, religion. In order for religion to be true, it one has to be universally true. So you would have to, if a person is going to say that their religion is true, the amount of I don't want to say myopia, right? Just to think that your specific religion, I don't want to say arrogance either, but I think it's just slightly narrow to think that with certainty your religion is true and that other religions who rely on equally fanciful measures are untrue. Of course, as an atheist, I mean, there are people who say that atheism is a religion. I mean, in the sense that it's a belief system, maybe, but religion, no, because a religion is something that a person requires faith. Religion requires faith. If you knew that God existed, there would be no element of faith. You wouldn't have to have faith. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't actually see God. You don't get to see any of this. So you only have your faith to believe that, you're going to go to heaven if you live this righteous life. Let's see. Maybe you'll expand on the basic facts things, but would not be falsifiable by saying that one's perception is not necessarily a reliable source of evidence. Like an example you gave with the chair. Wait. But wouldn't be falsifiable thing. Yeah, so one's perception is absolutely not a reliable source of evidence. And then to see that, go to Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes is a philosopher. Let's see, philosopher, if I can even fucking spell it. Who had the table of certainty. So Descartes' whole point was, what can I prove? I'm really glad you brought that up. So Descartes' point was, what can I prove with certainty? Well, he thought, okay, I could say that, I'm a man. Well, not necessarily true, because he could have been dreaming. He could be in the Matrix, right? He could be a creature of some kind who has been programmed to believe something. He couldn't prove, and the point of the table of certainty is it's certainty. What could you prove, right? So Rene Descartes had this metaphorical table of things that he thought, what are things that I could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt are 100% certain? And there was only one thing that he could prove, and it is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And the point here was, well, he might... The point here was, even though I might be dreaming, even though I might be a fucking like a sheep creature who's hooked up to like the Matrix, you don't know, or it's like the Rick and Morty, like a fucking alternate dimension or something. Even though you don't know really who you are or what you exist, and that's what cogito ergo sum means. It means I think, therefore I am. So the only thing that Rene Descartes could prove basically as a fact was that he exists. Not necessarily in any capacity. He couldn't say specifically in what capacity. He couldn't say I'm sleeping or I'm having a dream or I'm tripping on acid. But Rene Descartes said, you know what? I can't prove a lot, but I can prove that in some fucking way I exist. And he knew that because he had the thoughts that asked the question. The very existence of the brain, the very existence of the individual, that's what he was saying was certain. Not that he was anything in particular, but just that something was there. And this brings me into a really good, something else I really like too. So 2 facts. What are things that are absolutely true? What can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt? Well, there's 2 of them. First, it's mathematics. 1 plus 1 equals 2. That is a truth. And it doesn't matter whether a person denies that truth or whether they accept that truth. The basic laws of science and the basic laws of mathematics, they're consistent. And for all intents and purposes, we may conclude that they're in fact true. Another thing that's true, irreducibly true. Let's see. All bachelors are unmarried. So the key here is bachelors and unmarried. Why is this true? Well, it's a self-referential truth. We have this self-referential truth because in order to be unmarried, or in order to be a bachelor, I had that backwards. In order to be a bachelor, you must be unmarried. And if a person is married, they're no longer a bachelor. This is about categories. So this is more of a categorical way to measure truth. It's more of a just by the thing's own self-referential existence. That's why it's true. And similar to mathematics, these 2 things are some of the only things that can be kind of deductively true, whether a person acknowledges them or not. Death. Is that yeah. So even death, right? A person can we prove that we die, or can we prove that death exists? Prove it? It would be very difficult to prove it. Inductively, it makes, I know that we die, and I know that all human beings die, but it would be impossible to deductively prove that. However, I could prove to you that 1 plus 1 equals 2, and you have to acknowledge it. And I can also prove to you that all bachelors are unmarried. So those are 2 of the only things I could really only prove. Eddie, have you watched Sam Harris talk at the Atheist Convention on death and the present moment? It's wild. No, I haven't. Is it a recent talk, or is it kind of an older talk? I like Sam Harris a lot. Sam Harris, he has a really chill voice. I read Free Will. Sam Harris was big on this too. So Sam Harris is big on determinism. And this is just a philosophical idea that everything is determined, that everything is already set out, so that things have already, that free will doesn't exist. So the idea of free will is obviously, as it sounds, the idea that we have the liberty to choose our future, that things are not set in stone. And then conversely, you have the idea of destiny. So Sam Harris, in kind of a loose sense, believes in destiny, believes in determinism. He says that free will is not something that's true. And then in order to expand upon this point, he brings up neuroscience. Sam Harris is a neuroscience, or he's a neuroscientist. And one of the arguments for this case of determinism is that if a human being has a device hooked up to their brain, that device will be able to register and pick up what they're going to do before they do it in certain ways. So if a person is going to reach for an apple, that device might register it before they do. And of course, I forget the specifics of how this thing is proven. I'd have to. It's been a fucking long time since I opened up anything by Sam Harris, but I remember that being kind of the crux of the argument that he had. So yeah, debating is argumentation debate. It's something that I think really deserves a lot more attention, and it's something that I think is just fun. I've always thought that it's kind of fun, and it really pissed me off when I was younger. I had a lot of people who, especially adults, who would kind of discount what I said just because I was fucking young. Like I remember being a teenager, like a young teenager, and trying to argue with people about religion or about punishments or whatever, and people just discounting me because I was like 13, saying like, "Oh, you're too young. You know, what why should I listen to you? You're like a baby." You know, this is a great, let's bring up this. Excellent. A good segue into this. So logical fallacies. We've kind of gone over the basics of argument, how there's 3 types of arguments. There's a fact debate, a value debate, and then a policy debate. Well, once the debate is already unfolded, and once it's in the middle of unfolding, how do we decide what is appropriate and what's not appropriate? Well, we use logical fallacies. And these most often, things like straw man, which is misrepresenting your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. Not star man, straw man. So for the stimulus, an example of this would be someone says, okay, we're going to give each American $1,200 for the stimulus. A logical fallacy would be, oh, so you just want to take care of people for the rest of their lives? That's, of course, not what I'm saying. If I said that people should receive this one-time stimulus, that's all that I'm saying. But if you were arguing that and then your opponent said, oh, you just want to give people all this money forever, huh? You could say, excuse me, that's a straw man. You're misrepresenting my argument. Misrep. Make it easier to attack. And then we have another common one. I'll just go over a few of them. These are very important. Ad hominem. Hominem? Yeah. This is just a straight up insult. So this would be if you said that we're going to give everyone, let's go into this $1,200. So if one of us proposed the $1,200 stimulus, an ad hominem attack would go, you're a communist. Literally, just to call someone a communist or to call someone a socialist. That would be an ad hominem, to where you're literally just attacking them, you're attacking their character, and you're not addressing the substance of what was said. And this is extremely common. Trump is a fucking master of both of these. And although I'm very impressed. I think watching Trump debate is like one of the fucking coolest things in the world. Trump does not abide by any of this that I'm talking about, and it doesn't matter. The dude is capable of manipulating an audience in a masterful way. So you do have to be careful. If you're arguing with someone, sometimes it's better to kind of read the room and literally just bullshit. If you're arguing in front of people who maybe are not going to be they're not going to be sympathetic towards a complex intellectual argument, just bullshit, right? I mean, sometimes ad hominem is the right move. Logical fallacies they're bad to do in certain contexts, like in an academic context. You don't want to use a logical fallacy, but in a fucking presidential debate, a logical fallacy might win you the election. So although these are not ideal in an academic sense, there is definitely a fucking time to use logical fallacies. So another one. And this would just be the no true Scotsman. So this would be saying, the idea of this is I like this way, and that no person who's an American would like it the way that you're saying. So if a person was making a no true Scotsman argument, you'd say, America is not about this. America is not about giving people money. Even though it is. I mean, that's kind of bullshit. But you could make the argument America is not about giving away free money. No American would ever propose that. That's better. That's better. No American would ever propose this. This is an un-American. To just say that it's un-American, that would be kind of a no true Scotsman argument. To where you're literally just saying, well, based off of your identity as an American, you have to believe this certain thing. Or, well, based off of your identity as a whatever, you have to follow in accordance to this belief or whatever. Another really important one. The hasty generalization. And this is just making a conclusion, making a generalization before you have all of the evidence. This is one of the most common. I should fucking put this one on top. Pretty much anytime you're going to argue with someone, if you want to kind of mindfuck someone, accuse them of, not even accuse them, but identify them as committing a hasty generalization. And that's just making a generalization without having the facts. I mean, you don't even really need to go into deep analysis for that. It's just basically assuming you're saying something that you don't have the evidence for, and you're just saying it before you have all the information. And this is extremely common in our daily lives, not in an academic sense as much, but just in the kind of arguments that we have with each other. Jose, logical fallacies. Exactly, dude. They're very important. They're very fucking important. So logical fallacies, although they're not ideal, and there's more. There's the genetic fallacy, which would just be because where something came from, it's bad. The genetic fallacy, you could say, well, I'm an atheist, right? I could say that all things that come out of Christianity are bad. However, I think that Jesus Christ had a few good ideas, things that I actually agree with, like helping the poor and whatnot. So if I rejected everything in the Bible, then I would be committing the genetic fallacy. If I said that every word in the Bible is fucking trash, I would be committing the genetic fallacy, because I am saying just because whatever the person is saying came from the Bible, it's automatically bad. I should evaluate. The proper thing to do would be to evaluate the merit of each argument that you hear, rather than just shooting it down based off of who said it or their supposed lack of credentials. That's always kind of, pissed me off when people just like, fuck college. Like, yeah, I go to college and whatnot, but fuck college. I've learned much more just on my own. I have not learned that fucking much in school. So I think like the official titles and whatnot really are kind of irrelevant, especially when you're having this kind of debate, right? And that's one of the beauties of debate. I think one of the reasons, I'll kind of start wrapping it up here. Leveler. And this is what I mean by the leveler, is that if a person is saying something, regardless of whether your parent or your spouse or an authority figure or whatever, you can disagree with them and you could be right. I mean, it's really cool. Just because someone is in a position of authority over you doesn't mean that they're going to be right all the time. And it's necessary, in my opinion, to evaluate things as you want to. Don't just listen to other people. Don't even fucking just listen to me. Like, look at things for yourself and then decide for yourself what you want to believe is true. If you're in a fact debate or a value debate or a policy debate, like, don't just defer to the person that you're debating because they use big words or because they went to fucking college or whatever. Any person can use these basic tools to see if points are cogent, to see if points make sense, or to see if things are just completely bullshit. Because oftentimes a person can just use a lot of jargon to basically say something that's not true. Here's a good example of that. Let's say green technology. So let's say that you're debating green technology with a person. So you're saying the US needs more green technology. Or the US. The US should invest in green technology. But this isn't so much on the policy. This is just going to be on the terms. So what if you're debating someone and they use a word and they use the word differently than you? So when I say green technology, and then colloquially, we all know that green technology means like wind and solar and shit. That's what it means, like in a general sense. Let's say you're debating someone and they say, okay, the USA should invest in green technology. And then they start talking about painting things green. Like, yo, dude, we're going to paint our nuclear reactors green. Painting nuclear reactors green. Now, isn't that some shit, right? So if you were debating someone and the resolution, the thing that you were debating was the US should invest in green technology, and then a motherfucker comes out and says, okay, I'm gonna paint my nuclear reactors green. What the shit, right? You would prepare for the debate thinking about, solar and the problems with wind and the problems with sustainability, blah, blah, blah. But then your opponent comes out and then says some bullshit. Well, you would run what's called a topicality. And that is basically about, it's a challenge to the definition of a term. And I will go over this too. So if someone said the US should invest in green technology, and then they start talking about painting nuclear reactors green, you would say, you're using the word green technology, but you're using the word incorrectly. So in order to prove that they're using the term incorrectly, so it would just be yaha versus a naha until you start bringing up specific points. These are called standards. And standards are why a person should believe your definition. So if there are two definitions, say this. Because this is really what it's about. Competing interpretations. So if two people are debating green technology, or two or more people, and then one of them is defining it as painting nuclear reactors green, the two teams or the two people would have they'd have competing interpretations of what green technology meant. So the way that you would prove that your definition is superior in a debate, if two people are debating and then the debate comes down to a single word or a single term, well, it's time to specifically say why your term is better. One of the reasons you could say, well, topic literature. So you could say there's been a lot of books that have been written regarding green technology. You could say if you Google green technology, and you will distinctly see that green technology means sustainable technology. It means technology that's environmentally conscious, not fucking like oil wells that are just painted green. And a person could try and do a shady move like that. And technically, if they were not called, they might win the debate. They might be able to win the debate. And if a person doesn't have the ability to prove why their interpretation is better, they're going to be at a significant disadvantage. So it's very important to know, even once the debate has begun, how do you decide which interpretations of specific words are going to be used? How do you come to do that? Well, you use standards. So topic literature is one standard. You could say there's been a lot. If you Google this thing, there's a lot of literature. I'll be serious about it. Literature corroborating my definition. So you say, dude, there's a lot of if you do like a fucking academic journal search, you'll see all the journals are they provide a consistent definition to the one that I've listed. Another standard, education. You could also say, aside from the topic literature, you say, okay, one reason why here's why you should believe my specific term. And this is, my specific interpretation about interpretations. So you would say, one, topic literature. Additionally, education. You'd say, my use of the word provides more education. And this would just mean that your use of the term or your use of the word, it includes a greater scope of things that can be debatable. So there is a debate that is to be had over whether certain countries or certain individuals should invest in green technology or conventional technology. That's a real debate that is constantly unfolding. A debate over whether painting fucking oil wells green is green technology. That debate's not really educational. It's kind of a nonsensical debate. So you could say, aside from not being educational, it's kind of a fucking waste of my time. And this brings me to something else. So let's say counterplans. I kind of mentioned this earlier. So in the case of the stimulus package is $1,200, and let's say someone says we need to give people this money. We need to give people $1,000. You could reject that based off of any number of reasons. You could say it's not enough, it's too much, whatever. One of the best specific ways, if you're arguing someone about a specific policy, it's much better, say this, have a counter plan. Having a counter plan allows you to not just shit on what they're saying, it allows you to actually have some offense of your own. So if you're having a policy debate, more often than not, it's going to be one person saying why something should happen, and then another person saying why it shouldn't happen. Those kind of debates, one of them has a plan. So you have one person saying, saying we need to give people $1,200. That's one person's plan. The person debating them, instead of just saying, nuh-uh, they could say, let's see, bad. Here's the bad way to respond to that. Nuh-uh. That's bad. That's fucking bad. Okay. Here's the better response. The better response would be, here's an example. And this isn't actually, this is debatable. Bam. So if you're debating someone, it's much more persuasive often to be able to throw out a different kind of plan rather than just saying that's bad, because oftentimes they're the two sides. I'll say affirmative. I'll say affirmative and negative, right? To the affirmative is the side that wants something to happen, and the negative is the side that doesn't. So the affirmative just says, we need to do this, and here are the reasons we need to do this. Instead of just saying, no, we shouldn't do that, it's much better to say, not only should we not do that, here's what we should do instead. And the here's what we should do instead allows you to have the exact same kind of credibility as the people or the person that is trying to convince you of the original plan. So this gives you offense, and it gives you something that you could use against your opponents rather than just playing on the defense. And it's something that should be employed as often as a person can. Let's see, I love your Predator voice imitation. God damn, I love your channel. Patrick Sanchez, dude, you're a badass, man. Thank you. Do more chat analysis. You make awesome chat analysis videos. Dude, those videos are so fucking long. I slog through hours and hours. I mean, I like doing it, but I think out of all the videos that I do, well, the chat analysis and the fucking interrogation analysis, man, those things run so long. They're epic. They're like Lord of the Rings, dude. It's like watching my fucking Jim Roush interrogations, like fucking sitting down and watching the Lord of the Rings. Like, there's a lot. Hey, bro, I just want to say your analysis videos are top notch. I appreciate the way you use your education vocabulary to your advantage. Thank you, dude. You want chicks? I go to the swingers club. To be honest, last time I went to the swing. Oh, you walked out of the swingers club, Troy? Me too. Last time I went to the swingers club, I walked out. Let's talk about that. Should you go to the swingers club? Let's do an impact calculus on that. You could do that, swingers club. Impact calculus. Time frame. Magnitude. Probability. We can do the probability. The probability of Jim walking out is 1000%. There we go. What other aspects of debate are there? Oh, here's something else. So similarly, let's say you're debating someone. A/F spec. Let's say you're debating someone and they're just being very vague. Let's say that they say, you know, we need to increase welfare. And you're like, what do you mean increase welfare? Like, what does that mean specifically? And they say, I don't know, just increase it. You could say, well, exactly. What do you mean specifically? Calling into question the details of a person's argument oftentimes is enough to expose its weakness. So if a person is making an argument and they're being incredibly vague, simply asking them for specifics, saying, okay, well, who's going to do it, right? These are the questions. Who's going to pass the policy? You know, if you're going to give people money, is it going to be the Fed? Is it the Fed? Is it the, I don't fucking know, the Department of Agriculture? I mean, it wouldn't be, but there are different governmental bodies that do different things that serve different functions. So specifying the person who's going to do it is important. Oh, you know what? Let's just get into this. Let's just get into this. So I'm just going to give you an example of what a case could look like if you were making an argument. Here's what the case could look like. So here's the mandate. This would be the thing that you're arguing. The U.S. will create a no-fly zone over fucking what, North Korea. Okay, so this is just something that's completely random. I'm just kind of making it up, right? So this is completely random. So if that was what you were arguing, you said, you know what, the US will create a no-fly zone over North Korea. Well, what does that look like? First, you have to think the agent. Who's doing it? In this case, it would be the United States federal government, of course, which oversees various branches of the military. But rather than being too specific, rather than just saying, you know, the Air Force or the Army or whatever, I would just say the United States federal government would be the agent. And then you go into the funding. Okay, so someone says we need to create a no-fly zone. How are you going to pay for it, right? So that costs money. In order to do anything, it costs money. So it helps to be able to explain how you're going to pay for a plan that you're proposing. Rather than just saying we need to do this thing, it's really helpful to be able to articulate how you're going to pay for it. So you could say what, the Hamilton tax or whatever fucking tax. You could propose a slight increase in taxes. You could propose that tax money be diverted from something else. You could say fucking like what, defund this to pay for that. So that's another way that you could try to explain the funding for your plan. But if you have a plan, it's helpful for credibility to be able to explain how you're going to fund it. Furthermore, how are you going to enforce it? So the agent It's just basically the person that's going to be acting. That's not always the person who's going to be enforcing. So if you're enforcing it, then it would be the Air Force or the military, the Air Force, whatever, the Marines, whatever military body, or you could just say the United States federal government if you wanted to as the enforcer, because they're both the one that's issuing the plan, and then they're also the one that's going to fucking demand that no one or that everyone adheres to the plan. Let's see. And then time frame. ASAP. That's almost always the time frame. So if you were actually proposing that something be done in a governmental capacity, so if you were saying the United States need to do certain, they need to do X action, you would say, here's what they need to do, here's who's doing it, here's how it's going to get paid for, here's who's going to enforce it, and then here's the time frame. And that would just allow you to have like a full comprehensive idea of what the future would look like if you were to actually implement the plan that you were talking about. So when people are talking about even something like minimum wage, so if someone said, here's a good one. So for instance, if someone said the state, if people were arguing, people were debating that whether California should raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour. This would be the agent here, instead of being the federal government, would obviously be California. The funding for this, well, that would be a difficult one. Obviously, it doesn't cost anything for the government. So the funding for this, you could just say normal means. There's really nothing. It doesn't cost the government anything. It costs businesses, of course, and that's a separate kind of issue. But it wouldn't really cost the state anything in order to increase minimum wage. The enforcement would be the state. It would be California. And then the time frame for this one would be as soon as possible. Of course, the time frame there is usually one of the better ones. What do you guys think? Are there any questions or anything? I've kind of gone over pretty much everything that I kind of really wanted to go over. And I haven't smoked. I'm completely sober. I think that's why I fucking made this video. Kind of just want to see how long I could like not smoke at this point. But yeah, I really miss thinking about this. I think that's one of the only things I'm bummed out about regarding fucking this school being closed. I like having these kinds of discussions, and I like thinking about this kind of shit. I think it's just kind of fun and kind of interesting. It's almost like a game. I think that's why I'm apolitical. But that's probably why I still follow politics so closely. Even though I don't necessarily, I'm not like backing really anything, but watching the game unfold, like watching the debates unfold, is fucking phenomenal. Okay, about this, yeah. So how to debate with a cheater. Okay, so what do you do when someone is just bullshitting you? So when I say a cheater, I don't really mean someone who is like breaking the rules of argumentation. I just mean someone who's basically a poor debater. So someone who's not going to use logic and all this. Someone who's just going to basically say whatever they want in order to win. Someone who's going to smooth talk the audience, right? So for this, in my estimation, it would probably be good to fight fire with fire. And I think we could see this when you see Trump versus Clinton, motherfuckers. We remember that in the United States of America, and that's the context that I'm speaking in the United States of America, being smart isn't really something it's not necessary. I think having balls, metaphorically, you could argue literally, but certainly metaphorically, having balls is more important it's more important of a quality of a leader than just being a fucking intellectual. And Hillary Clinton didn't get that. Hillary Clinton really fucking dropped the ball. So how did Trump fuck Hillary Clinton in the ass? Well, Hillary Clinton said that when Trump hits low, they go high. So Hillary Clinton refused to get on Trump's level. So if someone is going to make logical fallacies directed at you, if they're going to make ad hominem attacks against you, if they're going to say things that are patently false or things that are blatant lies, yeah, so I think that the best thing we could do is to run with it rather than trying to default on this kind of shit. Fight fire with fire. There's a time and a place where playing by the rules is important. Like in an academic sense, there's a time when you wouldn't be able to just like call someone like ugly or whatever, or like make fun of someone. But sometimes that is the strategic move to make. So one of the things I remember is it was one of Trump's best zingers during the debate. Hillary Clinton said, blah, 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 if you were president. And then Trump immediately shot back, if I was president, you'd be in jail. And nothing else in the debate mattered. In that moment, the entire room erupted in laughter, and it wasn't even a presidential debate. It was just fucking ownage. It was just like a wrecked video. It wasn't about the issues that were being discussed. And for a few seconds, it was just like the audience was just erupting in laughter, and Trump immediately won when that happened. Similarly, when Trump was asked by Megyn Kelly, Megyn Kelly said, okay, you've called women fat pigs and fucking whatever. You've basically said misogynistic shit. Trump responded, only Rosie O'Donnell. Of course, that's not true. Trump said he's said this shit to multiple women, but him saying only Rosie O'Donnell, it demonstrates, it's like show, don't tell. It demonstrates that he's funny. It demonstrates that he's likable. We like that. So even though he said all these horrible... Now, think about what you would do, right? If someone just accused you of doing something bad, if someone just said, you did this fucked up thing, how do you respond? Well, you could respond and be like, yeah, what I said, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm sorry. You could basically apologize and say, yeah, you're right. That's oftentimes not the strategic move. Sometimes it's more strategic to be funny. If you can be funny, be funny. Because let me fucking tell you, people like to laugh in general. So it's very important if you're debating someone who is going to just consistently employ logical fallacies against you, don't try and take the high road. It's probably not going to work out in your favor. Just try and play the game if you can. So yeah, this is basically just my thoughts on speech and debate. I'll stick around for a few more minutes to see if anyone has any questions. You could post them and I'll go over them. If not, I'll kind of just like recap on what I've already done. 3 different types of debates. Fact, value, policy. Furthermore, each of which has its own separate structure. The structure of these two is very similar. It's simply this. It's a ABC. A. So this is claim. This is the structure of it. It would be first a claim, then a warrant, and then a conclusion. Similar for value. It's a claim, and this is just whatever your succinct claim is. The fact claim is the world is round. The value claim is dogs are better than cats. I mean, whatever your claim is. The warrant, of course, is the evidence. Science tells us this for the first one, and then the bottom one, well, dogs are, cats use litter box. Whatever your fucking warrant is, whatever evidence you'd use to support your claim. Your warrant should always support your claim. Otherwise it's just an unfounded claim. Like any claim that you have, you should be able to provide evidence for to support it. And then the conclusion. And then of course, each of these, the conclusion is simply putting it in a greater context and making sense of everything that's been said. And then so policy has a separate structure. So if you're ever debating policy, it's oftentimes easy to think of this as harm. So what are you fixing? What are you fixing? Why do you need to enact the policy in the first place? What is bad about right now that needs to be fixed? What is going on that needs immediate attention? Links. How does your plan work? What are you doing? Are you putting money in people's pockets? Are you sending soldiers overseas? Internal links. Specifically, how does your plan work? This is this. And the internal links is probably where a lot of the meat is going to be in an argument. This is going to be where you're talking about how you get to your impacts. And of course, the impacts. What happens after you pass your plan? So if you wanted to send send explorers to Mars, right? That could be a policy. A person could say, okay, I think that we should send explorers to Mars, or we're going to colonize Mars. That's the United States. Okay, so that could be an argument. The harms could be the planet's dying. You could say, well, Earth is fucked for X, Y, and Z reasons. Earth is fucked. Links. How does your plan work? Well, we invest in SpaceX. And then the internal links. Specifically, what is SpaceX going to do that is going to allow the United States to colonize Mars? Say, well, we're going to give money to SpaceX. SpaceX is working on this shuttle. This shuttle's already been shown in X, Y, and Z studies. We've already done this. That's where you're going to talk about specifically how your plan is going to work. So in the case of colonizing Mars, you would just give specifics about what SpaceX is doing, what they've already done, and how your plan is going to be implemented. And then finally, if you were stating the impacts, you'd just describe, okay, here's what's going to happen as a result of colonizing Mars. So you'd say the survival of the human species. If that's what your argument was, if you were trying to win an argument on colonizing Mars, I think the best argument you could do would be to say that it's necessary, to say that it's essential, and that it's the last hope for humanity. If that was the case, if Earth was in fact dying and the only chance of survival for the human race was to become extraterrestrial, it would probably happen. So I think that's one of the only things that would really push that up to the front, because there's so many other issues that could use funding and that could use attention and resources, right? Like in the middle of this fucking coronavirus outbreak, should the government spend any money right now on such frivolous projects? Is the colonization of Mars a worthwhile endeavor when so many people are going without ventilators and whatnot? That's the kind of shit that is subject to a debate, and that's why debate is extremely important. Jake Garcia said Jeff Sokol. I knew what this was. I just wanted to test it. That's all. Yeah, me too. Me too. Let's look at this. So I think you guys want to do this. So when Maurice Wolin says wasn't gonna do anything, right? We could say, no, you clearly were doing things because one, you showed up. Let's say one, you had the chat, and then two, you fucking showed up. You fucking showed up, dude. So So if Maurice Wolin said I wasn't going to do anything, a refutation to that, a proper debate refutation would be, well, Maurice, well, Mr. Wolin, you had this chat, and in the chat you talked about doing sexually explicit things. Furthermore, you showed up. So not only did you have the chat and talk about doing these things, you then committed a separate action, an extending action, and you actually followed through on what you were saying in real life. And of course, these two things, having intent, so let's just clarify this, is intent. That's basically what it shows. It shows intent, that he planned on it. And then And then by showing up, Maurice Wallen was making a move towards the completion of a crime. So there are two separate ways that Maurice Wallen there are two separate ways that we could conclude that Maurice Wallen in fact was going to do things. That when he said I wasn't going to do anything, it was a lie. So I would debate Maurice Wallen on that. If I were one of the cops, I would have fucking argued with him right there. A lot of the predators who say that they weren't going to do anything, or they weren't going to fucking they you know, they had second thoughts, blah blah blah. These are the kinds of refutations Chris Hansen, or whoever the person is, whoever the police officer or whoever the person confronting them is, they're going to be relying on this kind of reasoning. They're going to be using this basic kind of argumentation structure of logical chains where you say, okay, if this is this, then this must also be this. You have to put things into the broader context in order to understand what's going on. What's wrong with asking questions? It's my first time. Nothing's wrong with asking questions. I've heard that my Jeff Stacy voice is unique. I really want to do, I shouldn't even say it, but I've wanted to do the Jeff Stacy chat log for so long, just to fucking, I think it might fuck up my voice so hard though. I can only talk like Jeff Stacy for a little bit before I'm just fucking like coughing and shit. It would just wreak havoc on my throat, I think, if I actually did this Jeff Stacy video. So let's see. I think this is almost it. If there's any more questions, yeah, you could post them. If not though, that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll definitely be back, probably to do some more shit. I don't know what it's gonna be, but I'll definitely be doing something else very soon, probably. So I hope this has been informative. If you have any more questions regarding debate, and especially if you have any ideas for some TCAP related topic that I could debate with another content creator who I'm sure you guys know. If anyone has any ideas like that, I would really like to know, because it's fucking awesome to some of you guys say the coolest shit. Like, I love having this channel just because I get to fucking see like the awesome and cool shit that people say. So yeah, let me know if you have any cool ideas for a debate that I could do with another content creator. And thank you for watching. Until next time, guys.